Good evening, America. Welcome to the Tuesday edition of Just the News, No Noise. I'm your host, John Solomon, reporting to you, as always, from Washington, D.C. A very busy news day around the country. Opening statements in Hunter Biden's criminal trial on gun charges in the federal court in Delaware, and new revelations about what Hunter Biden was doing to try to help a Ukrainian business associate get a visa in the United States. We're going to have more on that overnight and tomorrow. Be sure to check that out. Chairman Jason Smith last night talked about that on the show. We have brand new documents that are going to be coming out in the morning that will further accentuate what the chairman said. And finally, perhaps one of the most important stories of the day, FBI whistleblower Marcus Allen has been restored. That's right. The FBI has reached a settlement, returned all the money that it didn't pay him for the last 2 years, gave a security clearance, and now he is retiring. We're going to kick off the show in just a few seconds with the lawyer who helped Marcus Allen fight that. It's so important to protect whistleblowers. Tristan Leverett from the Empower Oversight Whistleblower Center will join us at the top of the show for that very big story. But as we always do at this point in the show, great time to turn things over to my amazing co-host, Amanda Head in Los Angeles. She's got a lot more headlines than me, Amanda. News breaking out all over the place today.
Amen, and I can't wait to talk to Tristan, but I also can't wait for what you have forthcoming, because anytime John Solomon says, I've got documents, you know something explosive is going to be on the radar. All right, but I do have to bring up Attorney General Merrick Garland's testimony from earlier today, because it was something else. First, the Attorney General complained that Americans see the justice system as corrupt, as having two standards of justice, and he largely blamed political discourse for that, not charging President Trump with crimes relating to keeping classified documents, but not charging President Biden when he was found to do the same when he didn't have the power to declassify, or raiding Trump's home for the documents when they simply could have just asked for them. Maybe all of that has a little something to do with Americans' perception of the Department of Justice. But he had the chance to put this all to bed when he was asked by Congressman Matt Gaetz if he would provide communications the DOJ had with Alvin Bragg, Fani Willis, and or Letitia James' offices. So can you guess what he had to say to that? Take a look.
Will the Department of Justice provide to the committee all documents, all correspondence between the department and Alvin Bragg's office and Fani Willis' office and Letitia James' office?
The offices you're referring to are independent offices of state.
I get that.
State.
The question is whether or not you will provide all of your documents and correspondence. That's the question. I don't need a history lesson.
Well, I'm going to say again, we do not control those offices. They make their own decisions.
The question is whether you communicate with them, not whether you control them. Do you communicate with them, and will you provide those communications?
If you make a request, we'll refer it to our Office of Legislative Affairs.
But see, here's...
Regardless of the legality or the separation of the agencies, you can imagine why people feel the way they do, that the Department of Justice is definitely a part of the system that has two tiers, not just one tier. Now, when you don't do anything to dispel those rumors, the American people are going to continue questioning that, and I'm going to ask Tristan Leverett in just a few moments about that. But when you are actively trying to prosecute the current presidential chief political opponent of the guy in office, people start to wonder. Anyway, we are going to get all of that and more tonight, including President Biden's border executive order. But first, let me hand it back to you, John, so that we can get to our first guest.
Yeah, that was an amazing exchange. And remember, we have a lawsuit pending against Fani Willis about her contacts with the White House. And we earlier on this show turned up the emails where National Archives was coordinating with Joe Biden's White House counsel on the criminal investigation into the classified documents. So the ring of communication between Biden and all these different prosecuting offices, it's a real thing. There's real documents, real evidence of it. It wasn't a very convincing answer from the Attorney General. It was a great clip you played there. Really important. So... well, on that note, it's a great time to bring in our good friend. He is the president of the Empower Oversight Whistleblower Center. He's also running for a seat in the West Virginia legislature. He's our good friend, Tristan Leverett, and he joins us right now. Tristan, great to have you back on the show.
Thanks. Always happy to be here with you both.
Very big moment today, about noontime today. I think the news alert moved off of Just the News. A FBI employee who never did anything wrong. Marcus Allen was just simply doing his job. He thought there might be a reason for the FBI director to correct his testimony about some January 6th stuff. And for that trouble, he ended up getting his pay stopped and his security clearance. But today, you got him justice. Tell us what happened.
Well, after 27 months without pay, the FBI agreed to reinstate Marcus's security clearance. They also separately agreed to pay him all the back pay through that period. So this was a massive win. We're not aware of any other instance like this. This is unprecedented, where the FBI has restored a whistleblower security clearance. And this is exactly, the sort of thing that the FBI should. Of course, they shouldn't retaliate and suspend a clearance to begin with, but this is what they should be doing in those instances where they're found to have done wrong. So this is a huge, huge win for Marcus Allen, but also for whistleblowers all around in doing what's right and being able to be corrected in that. It's a huge admission from the FBI, especially because in suspending his security clearance, they accused him of being disloyal to the United States. They accused him of being a threat. And Delegate Stacey Plaskett, when Marcus and I testified at a hearing a year ago before the Weaponization Subcommittee, she made this big show of the fact that the committee, Chairman Jim Jordan, had invited these witnesses who'd had their clearances suspended. Clearly, they were disloyal. They were unpatriotic. They were threats to America. This was a decorated Marine, someone who had provided support in the Marine Corps and had been honorably discharged, had served multiple tours, had received commendations. And so this was a huge... it was just these were terrible allegations for him to see his name dragged through the mud and to see every mainstream media outlet repeat uncritically these accusations against him. So again, for him to have had his clearance restored is a massive, massive win for Marcus Allen and for the cause of right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I can't help but thinking, though, that the FBI's mentality in this was throw some money at the problem to make it go away, because obviously Michael Horowitz has taken a peep into this situation. And this settlement happened before Michael Horowitz released his findings. I feel like there's a little more juice that we can squeeze from that orange.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And, that is one of the challenges here, right? You shouldn't have to have an agency just acting in fear that they're about to be caught retaliating. But we absolutely had filed the complaint with Horowitz's office of the Department of Justice Inspector General. And I think all the signs to us were that he uncovered very significant evidence of what we were alleging, that this was whistleblower retaliation. And so just this morning, I sent this letter to Inspector General Horowitz, waiving any Privacy Act rights Marcus had, to say, don't claim that we are a reason that you can't go and talk about the results of this investigation. We think that it's important in the interest of transparency and justice for you to go talk about what you found. So we're confident that Congress is going to take an interest in what Mr. Horowitz has to say. And we think that it's going to be very favorable in showing that what we said from the outset. I said on, Sean Hannity a year ago, on multiple things a year ago, on this program a year ago, when after we testified before Congress, the Inspector General is going to look at this, and we believe they're going to find he was retaliated against. And so we sent that letter today to give Horowitz the opportunity, to give him the right to have waived those Privacy Act charges so he can talk about exactly what they found. And we think it's going to be very positive to Mr. Allen.
Yeah, that's very important. There's another exchange in the course of today's hearing with the Attorney General where the Attorney General was asked, if there's evidence that there was retaliation against FBI agents, will you take any action? I think the Attorney General, if I recall correctly, said he would take action, that if anyone's found to have done that, that makes the IG report all the more important to come out, correct?
That's right. Now, keep in mind, there will not likely be an IG report at this point. So because he already, as part of the settlement agreement, we withdrew the complaints from the Inspector General's office. But again, that doesn't stop him from talking about what he found. Even if there's not a pending complaint, and even if he's not required to produce a report, he can still tell Congress exactly what he found. And so if he comes and says, yes, we found that there was whistleblower retaliation, Merrick Garland better stick by what he said today in committing to discipline those that committed that retaliation.
Yeah, good point.
Tristan, there's another thing that the Attorney General said today that was interesting to me, because he was smearing the notion that there was any type of communication between the DOJ in that clip that you just saw. And even if it's just Matthew Colangelo, even if the communications didn't exist reportedly between Fani Willis and the DOJ, or Alvin Bragg and the DOJ, or Jack Smith and the DOJ, the list kind of goes on and on. Even if it's just Matthew Colangelo, it's Matthew Colangelo, the former number 3 at the DOJ, who is Matthew Colangelo, the chief counsel for the prosecution in New York. That's already coordination within itself, isn't it?
Yeah, the question of what constitutes coordination. I mean, you look at all of these, you go back to Crossfire Hurricane, you look at the Mueller team, the folks that were, people who moved from one place to another. And the old saying that personnel is policy, I think applies more than ever in these instances, because people that clearly have agendas, clearly have biases, they seem to show up in these significant roles. And so, whether or not Garland can say that he directed some coordination, that doesn't change the fact that the Department of Justice, clearly had an impact through their personnel going in and staffing this case.
Yeah.
Very important. Yesterday on this show, Chairman Jason Smith of the Ways and Means Committee came on and said, hey, listen, we're going to be making a referral to the Justice Department, asking them to prosecute Hunter Biden for false testimony during his February 28th deposition during the impeachment inquiry. And one of the things he pointed out was that evidence that one of your clients, Gary Shapley, the IRS whistleblower, provided the committee was that Hunter Biden did, in fact, contrary to what he told the committee, try to help get a visa for his Burisma boss, Nikolai Zlochevsky, the man who owned Burisma Holdings, the guy who put him on the board of directors for that company, which, by the way, the State Department deemed to be corrupt. There was a single email that Gary Shapley, I think, had turned over as part of his cooperation, and the chairman seized on that, saying, listen, this contradicts it. We're going to be making public tomorrow a whole bunch of new emails that come from a batch that the FBI collected from Hunter Biden and his other business partners back in 2016. And they're very clear. Hunter Biden says, hey, my guy's taking care of it, talking about someone trying to take care of the visa. There's another one where Devin Archer saying, hey, Hunter's working on it. We're going to really show how accurate Shapley's testimony is. Why is it important at this point for Congress to address these sort of inconsistencies between what the whistleblowers have told them and what Hunter Biden tried to tell the American public?
All of these cases are about accountability, right? The American people are tired of hearing, whether it's lawmakers, whether it's others out in the public, claim that there are problems and then there not be any accountability for it. And so you see that with these whistleblowers where, they're, again, Garland saying that he should discipline people. That's accountability for the people who did wrong. In this case, Hunter Biden, based on the information that Chairman Smith has released, Chairman Smith has been out there saying Hunter Biden lied to Congress. And for Chairman Smith to go out there, the next step is they need to make that referral. They need to take the next steps, because otherwise what they communicate to the world is it's totally okay to lie to Congress. Right. There are no consequences whatsoever. There's no accountability. And I think that more than anything else is what the American people are so frustrated with. Every tweet that I see, every time I see people speaking up, they're saying, okay, what's going to happen because of this? What's the outcome? What's the accountability? And so that's why I think they have to see this through to the end and ensure that if Hunter Biden did in fact lie to Congress, there are consequences for it.
Yeah.
Tristan, before we let you go, I want to ask you about what's happening in Delaware today, Hunter Biden's gun trial. We all saw the pretrial agreement in the plea deal that was tossed out because Judge Mary Ellen Noreika asked the right questions and saw pretty much straight through it. Does that color the way that this trial is conducted henceforth because of what they tried to do at the very beginning?
I think there are certainly some signs of that. So some of the reporting, I have not been up in Delaware monitoring the trial or anything, but some of the reporting has suggested that Judge Noreika is definitely keeping a close eye for shenanigans here. You can see that some of the, one of the witnesses who Hunter Biden's team had requested to come in to talk about whether or not, addiction could impact someone's state of mind when they filled out the form. She said, no, we're not going to hear that. This looks like it's just trying to prejudice the jury. And so there is a real concern about whether Hunter Biden's team, their goal is jury nullification, to get a group of people to feel sympathetic to him and say, well, regardless of what the law said, we're not going to charge him there. But so from all accounts, Judge Noreika is doing a good job of just trying to keep the trial in check, just trying to help everyone stick to the law and to the facts. And that's what this should be based on. That's what the IRS whistleblowers came forward with. It was all just about, here's the law. Here's how we have charged everyone else in these circumstances based on similar facts. Why should Hunter Biden be any different just because his father is the president of the United States? And yet, even here at the time of the trial, you have Joe Biden flying in, being there in Delaware, just a few minutes away. You have Joe Biden coming into the courtroom. This is clearly going to have an impact in such a small state as Delaware, where everybody knows each other to an extent, and certainly everybody knows the Bidens. And so that kind of intimidating tactic, is really significant. But Judge Noreika can help put a stop to that.
Yeah, it's also important to remember that there was a time when Hunter Biden's lawyers were attacking those very IRS whistleblowers, even though the whistleblowers gave accurate testimony and accurate evidence. Tristan, always great to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us again today.
Yeah, my pleasure.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break. Don't go anywhere. When we come back, the Republican leading the January 6th investigation in the House going to give us exclusive details right after these messages. Welcome back, America. Amanda stepped out for a second. She'll be back in the next block, but we've got a real treat for you right now. He is the chairman of the House Administration Committee's Oversight Subcommittee, the man running the most important investigation into what really happened on January 6th and what really happened with the January 6th committee that the Democrats run. Joining us right now from the great state of Georgia, Congressman Barry Loudermilk. Mr. Chairman, good to have you back on the show.
John, it's always good to be with you, my friend.
It's an honor to have you on. At the top of the show, we mentioned a very important development today. Today, you asked Alyssa Farah Griffin, the former ex-Trump White House aide, to provide testimony and cooperate with your investigation. Why is she so important?
Well, it's because of we've been trying to get to the bottom of this testimony from Cassidy Hutchinson, the one that everyone seems to know about that testimony, which is everything from President Trump trying to grab a steering wheel to choking a Secret Service agent to throwing cheeseburgers against the wall. And it seems that she is the only one that has any knowledge of these supposed actions. In fact, of all the Secret Service agents that testified, everyone contradicts her story.
Right.
So our question is there anyone out there that can corroborate these stories? And it seems to be from other information we have, as well as reading Cassidy's own book, that Alyssa was communicating with her, leading her up, encouraging her to have off-channel communications with Liz Cheney. And we want to find out from her, where do these stories come from? Did she know anything about them, or did she help Cassidy come up with some of the verbiage? I mean, we're just trying to get to the bottom. As you said, we want to get to the truth, and America deserves to know the truth.
Yeah, that's all the American public's ever wanted. Just give them the facts, and they've had a hard time getting facts about January 6th until you came along. You've opened up an extraordinary avalanche, I think, of new information. In the book, that's right, there are some insinuations in the book that Liz Cheney, the vice chairwoman of the January 6th committee, one of the few Republicans that ended up working on that committee with the Democrats, had a back channel way of communicating with Cassidy Hutchinson. That's very rare for Congress to be dealing with a witness sort of through a back channel. Is that one of the big areas of inquiry here?
It is, and we want to know, what was this channel of communications? What were you guys discussing? She was encouraging Cassidy, first of all, to go and testify to start with. And if I remember I've read her book as well, is that communication started before she even testified the first time.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is, in the first three testimonies that Cassidy gave, depositions, none of these stories ever came up. And if they were that significant, you would think that she would have, breached these subjects.
Right.
It wasn't until after her third transcribed interview that she did meet with Liz Cheney, and she met with Liz Cheney without her attorney. And that raises some questions right there about even the ethics of Liz calling her in to meet without an attorney being present. But after they had that meeting, Cassidy fired her existing attorney, and Liz arranged for her to get a new attorney pro bono. It was after she got the new attorney that then they went into Liz's hideaway office here at the Capitol, and they had another transcribed interview under oath. And this is where she came up with all these elaborate stories. So we're looking at what transcribed there. Why all of a sudden, after three testimonies under oath, that Cassidy never mentioned any of these things, and then all of a sudden there's this unprecedented meeting between her and Liz Cheney. Then they do this deposition or transcribed interview under oath that no one else on the committee knew of.
Right.
It was just between her and Liz. And then Liz brings everyone else in and shows them the videos of this transcribed interview. That's when they decided to take Cassidy Hutchinson immediately before the public without corroborating anything. So we're trying to get to the bottom of, where do these stories come from? Because Cassidy is the only one apparently that knows of anything like this. Even the people that she says she talked to that told her, look, I call it the REO Speedwagon testimony. If you remember their song, heard
Yep.
it from a friend who heard it from a friend who heard it from another. They're taking that type of testimony
Yeah, it's a great point.
over those that were there. And John, this is what is also interesting. Just 2 weeks ago, I was reading the interviews of the Secret Service agents who were with Trump
Right.
during that time period. Now, we're not talking about people back at the White House who were talking about his lip speech. We're talking about the driver of the limousine and the head of the entire protective detail. They were brought in by the Select Committee to testify, but they weren't brought in until November. It was in June when they paraded Cassidy Hutchinson before the world, and they let the world hear these stories. And what's interesting, John, is in the very beginning of the driver's testimony, his attorney starts off by chastising the Select Committee. And he said, we offered to come in July, August, September, and now it's November. So we found out for the first time that the driver had been offering to come in and testify under oath as far back as just a weeks after Cassidy made these claims, but the Select Committee would not bring them in. Wow. And then to top it all off, they never asked him about this incident.
Wow.
He had to interject it himself. So walking away just from that testimony tells me that Cassidy Hutchinson her testimony became the narrative of the Select Committee on January 6th. They had determined that was going to be the story, and they didn't want anything else to get in the way or circumvent that. But every testimony we have other than hers either never mentions those stories or totally contradicts her testimony.
Given that scenario that you laid out, do you have concerns that Liz Cheney and the Democratic January 6th committee tried to hijack the testimony, which is keep someone who could contradict it away from the public and let the public have this until after Election Day 2022?
Well, I think it's kind of clear that whether it was the worst case of preserving documents in the history of the House of Representatives, or that there were not only trying to keep those testimonies away, because immediately they bring Cassidy Hutchinson's to the forefront. They wait until November to even bring in the Secret Service agent who could, if he would have come in and said, yes, this happened, it's over with. Game over, right?
That would have been huge.
But no one else, no other Secret Service agent, no other White House employee, they all contradict her testimony. So here we are today, and I have spent over a year just obtaining these documents that, they'll tell us, no, we preserved everything. Well, if you preserved everything, where are the videotapes? We don't have any of the videotapes of any of the testimonies.
Still don't, right?
That they preserved. We still don't. We don't even know what happened to them.
Wow.
But fortunately, our incredible team has been able to get depositions that had gone missing, transcribed interviews, and a number of whistleblowers that are coming forward. And we still find documents that were never made public, because what people need to understand is we actually ended up with documents that exonerated, it contradicted, I should say, Cassidy Hutchins' testimony, but the Select Committee never made those public.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, the other documents that were sent away, that's made it more difficult for us to find them.
Yeah, that's how you've been doing this investigation. That's why we've learned so much. Mr. Chairman, it's always an honor to have you on this show. Thank you for such an important update.
All right. Thank you, John.
Thank you, sir. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, good news, Amanda will be back with us. We'll be talking more about President Biden's southern border executive order. People are up on arms about this. Remember, he originally said he didn't have the power to do it. Now he somehow found the power. We're going to get to the bottom of that in the next segment right after these messages. Hey folks, this month as we celebrate Father's Day, I'm reminded of my own dad. He was a man of strong values. We went to church, had family dinners, and honored the flag. These values shaped our home. My dad taught me to stand up for my beliefs, cherish loved ones, and appreciate our freedoms. This Father's Day, I found a perfect way to honor his legacy with an AMAC membership. AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens, champions the values that my father instilled in me: faith, family, and freedom. AMAC.us/Just News is your entryway to joining an incredible community of patriots. By joining AMAC, you support an organization that fights for these principles. For June only, you get a 2-year membership for just $16. That's right, 2 years for the price of one. Join me and thousands of proud members to be an AMAC member. Visit amac.us/Just News. Let's celebrate Father's Day together by standing up for what our dads believed in. Happy Father's Day, everyone.
Let's make them wonder. Let's squeeze them for a change instead of them constantly squeezing us. And then, finally, we rally around President Trump. We surround him with support.
Welcome back, America. We got a great interview upcoming, but first, a little breaking news just happened on Capitol Hill a few moments ago. The United States House of Representatives overwhelmingly passed a bill to sanction the International Criminal Court for going after one of America's most important allies in the Middle East, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The vote attracted 42 Democrats. So all Republicans, 42 Democrats voted against this. It's a major repudiation of President Biden, who didn't want his party to vote for this. We'll have more of that on justthenews.com. Be sure to check in on that all night long. A lot of breaking news. Now, there's still a lot of people talking. It's been almost a week, coming up on a week pretty soon, since the verdict against President Trump. People are extraordinarily angry. They're getting involved. They're jumping in. Our next guest has one of the best fingers to the pulse I know of anywhere in politics. He's the president of the Convention of States, and he's our good friend, Mark Meckley, joins us right now. Mark, great to have you back on the show.
Hey, great to be with both of you.
There are moments in politics that you can simply just feel. Sometimes something happens and then the ground starts shaking. You're like, something big has happened. I think the Democrats may have created an avalanche against themselves. The base of the Republican and conservative movement really energized by this verdict, no?
Absolutely. You know, when the verdict first came out, it was like a gut punch, even though I knew it was coming. But as I sat back and watched what was going on in social media, as I read my texts, as I read my feed on X, I saw that it was a blowback beyond anything that I expected. We've now seen almost $200 million in fundraising for Donald Trump. And I can tell you that the passion in the grassroots is as white hot as I've ever seen it. I've been around since the Tea Party days. This is as intense, literally, as anything I've ever seen.
That's pretty amazing.
Mark, does the left learn from this? Because even before the verdict came out, every time there was another charge against him, another venue, another prosecutor, another crime, alleged crime, every time there was a spike in the polling. And then with this, obviously there have been spikes, but it's the fundraising that shows you how people feel. Did they not learn anything? And what do they do now?
No, I don't think they're going to learn anything. They're not going to learn anything until such time as they lose the presidency and the Congress, and maybe not even then. And remember, these are ideologues. They're not just political operators. Their goal is to dominate and control everything. They don't care what methodology they use. And they're walking down the path of Marxists, and Marxists always end up putting people in jail. So I don't think they can back down from these policies.
It's pretty extraordinary. And I think some of the blowback is becoming clear. So North Carolina has long been considered a battleground state, but I think the latest polls had President Trump up like maybe 12 points, a really huge margin in a state that used to be a toss-up. Virginia's closed up to a dead heat. There is real clear signs now that even independents are moving away from the Democratic Party. How does Donald Trump season that? How do Republicans make sure that that translates into a too big to rig vote on the election day?
Yeah, I think from the Trump perspective, the most important thing that he can do is just continue to point at Joe Biden, and point out all the things that he's terrible at. The world is on fire. The Middle East right now, the news in Israel today is not good. Hezbollah rising up in the north. Iran is aggressive. China's aggressive in regard to the United States and Taiwan. We've got a mess all over the world. We've got a mess in Mexico. The border's a mess. Trump just needs to keep pointing at all of those things. I don't think he needs to point out the trial so much and the injustice of the verdict as to how bad Joe Biden is. It's going to be a referendum on Joe Biden this election.
Yeah, no doubt.
I want to shift gears to some of these early voting efforts. In states like where I am, California, first of all, when the ground shakes, it's not because of politics, for a different reason, and I'm going to hide under this desk. But for states like ours, early voting has been happening for practically as long as I've been here. Mail-in voting became a reality for every single citizen in California as a result of COVID, no matter whether they requested a ballot. Donald Trump announced his Swamp the Vote USA effort that is going to encourage early voting and the mail-in voting, which I think is spectacular, because until we can change the rules and get it back to one day, this is the way forward, it seems, Mark.
I think that's true, and I think this is a terrible mistake that Trump made last time. He indicated directly and indirectly that people shouldn't vote by mail, that people shouldn't be participating in early voting. And the problem is, when you get to actual polling day, some people don't make it to the polls, and you want to be able to bank those early votes. If that's the way the system works, if that's the way the game is written, you got to play by the rules, and you play hard and you play to win. And it sounds like Trump has learned that lesson and going to do that this time.
Yeah, no doubt. Big efforts underway there. You can see it. I think he's got an event in Arizona Thursday to really encourage people to get out and vote early when they can. That's a great idea. Mark, I want to talk about, you have one of the great Twitter feeds. I watch it often because there's a lot of great horizon watching that I think you do. One of the things I watched you talk about recently is the instability in our banking system. I don't think a lot of people are aware how much banks are owning in really bad commercial real estate portfolios and other sort of assets. There is a potential banking crisis on the horizon. I think you've heard the Fed chairman maybe suggest that maybe a little subtly. But this is something that's right beneath our noses right now, right?
Yeah, as far as I can tell right now, over 60 banks are completely upside down. They're insolvent. And if you think about the reason why, we had COVID. COVID emptied out the office buildings in the downtowns all over the country. People went to work from home, and mostly people didn't go back. So you've got vacant office buildings. You've got projects that were being built during the middle of COVID. They got finished out that have never been occupied. Mostly the banks have not written down these loans. In other words, they've been due, but they haven't been called, and they haven't wanted to call them because it would make their portfolios insolvent. Well, they're getting to that point, and we're going to see massive insolvency, a wave roll across the banking industry. What affects commercial banking affects the rest of the economy. I think we're in for a rough ride.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Mark, I remember when Silicon Valley Bank failed, one of the number one criticisms was that they didn't have a risk manager on their staff. They had someone to make sure that they checked off boxes for DEI. But at the end of the day, regardless of whether this has anything to do with Joe Biden, if it's just centered around the Fed and the FDIC and everyone who is putting out these alarm bells, Joe Biden is still, I think the perception is that it's still his problem of his administration, right?
He'll deny it for sure, because he always does, but it happened on his watch. Regulators have been watching. All of these banks are required to report at least quarterly. The regulators have known they're in trouble, and nobody's been sounding the alarm bells, at least nobody in the public sector, though a few in the private sector like me with backgrounds in commercial real estate have been paying attention to this. So I think it is going to be Joe Biden's fault, because it could have been turned into a softer landing. It should have been touched upon much earlier so that the public was ready for it. This is going to come all at once in a wave. It's not going to be pretty.
Yeah, that's a great point. Mark, real quickly, President Biden says he's for gun control. He says he's for everyone paying their fair share of taxes. His son will be on trial twice, once for violating gun rules, once for violating tax laws and being a tax scofflaw. How important is that to resonate with Americans, that the do as I say, not as I do, or do as I say, not as I do phenomenon is the Joe Biden legacy?
Yeah, and when you look at the polling, there are two things that really top the polls and what people don't like in politicians. One is hypocrisy, and the other is corruption. And what you're seeing is the intersection of both of those things here in spades. You're seeing people talking about gun control. Their family is in trouble for buying a gun when they were drug addicts and lying on that form. By the way, that was one of the most open and shut cases I've ever seen in my life. I'm very familiar with the gun laws. You lie on that form, you go to jail, period. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. The other side of it is the corruption, and the Biden crime family syndicate is incredibly corrupt. The American people don't like it, and I'm hoping we see all of that play out in the election.
Yeah, very important. Real quickly, Mark, for people who want to get involved with your great movie, the Convention of the States, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, go to conventionofstates.com, or like you said, John, you can follow me on Twitter at Mark Meckler.
Yeah, pretty important stuff. 24 states in the process of really exciting stuff. All right, Mark, thanks for your time, buddy. We always love having you on. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, a discussion about President Biden's southern border executive order. It isn't what it seems. People are already figuring that out. We've got a perfect guest to walk us through that in just a few minutes. But first, some important messages from our great supporters here at Real America's Voice. Hey, America, how many of you are firearms owners? Do you think that you could live with yourself if a gun was used to injure or kill someone you knew? The responsibility for ensuring that no one is injured with your firearm is paramount, and it's your responsibility. And there are a variety of tools on the market that are designed to help you be a safe gun owner when your gun is out of your safe, like muzzle stick, chamber, and barrel flags. One of my favorites. Muzzle stick, chamber, barrel flags offer a way for anyone, whether they handle firearms or not, to quickly see the loaded or unloaded status of a firearm, which could save lives. 1/3 of all firearm injuries are unintentional, which likely means that the firearm was handled by someone with no firearms training. And a high percentage of these injuries and deaths occur with children. That's right. This is completely preventable by locking up your gun. But if you choose to keep a firearm out of the safe, doesn't it make sense to take as many precautions as you can, like clearly letting everyone see the status of your gun? Just in time for Father's Day, in honor of those of firearms owning dads, Muzzle Sticks is offering 15% off all of its products. Use the code RANGEDAD and head over to Muzzlestick, MUZLSTIK.com today to place an order for yourself or for your dad or any one of your loved ones. After all, we only have one life.
Welcome back, everybody. Hey, I don't know if you saw this, but President Joe Biden did something today that he's been swearing for years that he couldn't do, and that is issue an executive order on border security. However, it doesn't really secure anything at all. It still allows immigrants to come in and claim asylum. It doesn't provide any further security. And Biden still found a way to blame others for the problems his administration created at the border. Check this out.
I've come here today to do what the Republicans in Congress refuse to do. Take the necessary steps to secure our border. 4 months ago, after weeks of intense negotiation between my staff and Democrats and Republicans, we came to a clear bipartisan deal. It was the strongest border security agreement in decades. But then, Republicans in Congress, not all, but walked away from it.
Joining us now to talk about all of this is former acting Deputy Chief of Staff at the Department of Homeland Security. She's the Director of Border Security and Immigration Center at the Heritage Foundation, Laura Reese. Laura, great to have you back. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I guess similar to Stella getting her groove back, Joe Biden got his groove back and got his power back, except that he actually had the power all along. The timing of this is very suspect. The manner in which it was done is quite suspect. But what are your thoughts?
Yes, we're 5 months out from Election Day, and that is what is driving this, where he suddenly can issue an executive order. It's not his first. He's issued several regarding the border, but he's been all over the map in his statements of whether he could and really wanting to blame Congress. So this executive order does 3 things, none of which is secure the border. It allows him to say he did something. It gives him another opportunity to try and bash congressional Republicans, even though he forgets about the House, which did its job over a year ago in passing H.R. 2, the Secure the Border Act, of excellent bill. And it whistles to his ally organizations on the left that they should sue to stop implementation of this. And right on cue, the ACLU has already stated that it will, in fact, sue to stop this.
Yeah. Laura, earlier today, I had an interview with Josh Burkeen, the congressman from Oklahoma, and he said, I think that this is a head fake, that it's designed to fail so that Joe Biden can claim he tried to do something, but it's not going to really happen based on the fact that the ACLU so quickly sued. Does there seem to feel like there's some shenanigans behind the scenes and that this is a head fake?
Absolutely, and I would bet money that these organizations got an advance copy. And the certain members of Congress on the left are screaming loudly about it. It's just showing the theater of all of this. And if you look at the substance, what's in the executive order, the exceptions swallow the rule. And so it, at one level, accepts 2,500 illegal aliens per day before, over 7 days before this expulsion authority can begin. And yet not counted in that number are unaccompanied children, anyone who's been here longer than 14 days, anyone who's made it farther north than 100 miles from the border, anyone who claims that they were trafficked here, and on and on and on. So I don't think this cap is ever going to be hit, and it's form over substance, truly.
Yeah, that's a great point. The exemptions really do eradicate it.
And it also kind of fits in the theme of what we have observed with the Biden administration with respect to border security, which is just kind of an evolution of syntax and lexicology, because they're not actually enforcing something that's illegal. They're just making something that was illegal legal until it is illegal again, I guess, at 2,500.
Right. And what it will do is add to the Biden administration's shell game, where in January of 2023, they told would-be illegal aliens, stop crossing between the ports of entry, use this CBP Mobile One application, make an appointment, and then you can enter through a port of entry. Those numbers have gone way up. And so I think those numbers will continue to increase per this executive order. And then the Biden administration will say, see, our numbers between the ports are down again.
Yeah, that's a really important point. Yeah. It wasn't that long ago where 1,000 crossings in a day was considered to be untenable. I think it was Jay Johnson during the Obama years using that number as like the high water mark that the government couldn't. Now Joe Biden has doubled it, plus 500, plus created all these exemptions. At what point do Americans start to become frustrated that Joe Biden is playing a shell game? And are Republicans doing enough to highlight what that shell game is?
Well, Americans are feeling this every day. It's why this issue is the number one issue for them, no matter where they're from. It affects the economy. It affects it overcrowds their schools. It overcrowds their emergency rooms. It adds to inflation. It adds to the housing shortage, et cetera. And so Americans are fed up with Joe Biden. It's one of the reasons he is doing this. He knows he's underwater. And that's why, 5 months out from Election Day, he is attempting this trick. So Americans are very fed up. But they also know we only have one president at a time, and that's Joe Biden. And it's his job to secure the border. And he's not going to pull one over Americans' eyes with this.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah. Laura, we continue to hear these stories about, Laken Riley in Georgia. I just spoke with Congressman Ralph Norman today, a similar situation in South Carolina recently. These continue to happen, and I have to think that the Biden administration, knowing that this is the number one issue on the minds of many Americans, they are bracing for impact and hoping that these instances don't continue happening. But with what he did today, that doesn't stop it. What do you think they are hoping for leading up to the election?
You're right. This isn't going to stop. Unfortunately, we are going to feel the effects from this open border for years to come in terms of crimes that were preventable and perhaps even terror attacks. When we're talking about over 2 million known gotaways who have entered the U.S., evaded Border Patrol while Joe Biden has been in office, that is a very real threat. And unfortunately, we learn about more preventable crimes on almost a weekly basis. The Biden administration, I think, is realizing that they have either let someone through that they shouldn't have. Recall just recently the attempt by 2 Jordanians to breach the Quantico military base. And so I think the Biden administration realizes they have an issue on their hands, and they are on the edges taking away some asylum process for someone who is either a serious criminal or might be a known or suspected terrorist. I mean, grounds that should have been excluded long ago by this administration. So that they are backpedaling. But again, Americans see through this and they are worried.
I think so, too. Yeah, I think the chickens will come home to roost. It just depends what that looks like. Laura Reese, former acting deputy chief of staff at the Department of Homeland Security and now director of Border Security and Immigration Center at Heritage Foundation. Welcome back, everybody, for this final segment. I have a few more things that I want to get to, including following up on something that Mark Meckler said, John. And I think back to when Silicon Valley Bank failed, and then you had, I think it was Signature, and then First Republic, and then I think PacWest was ultimately in trouble, although I do think they survived. But when you consider these banks that could be on the horizon of failing, that's something that the American people, like I said to Mark, it doesn't matter if Joe Biden or his Treasury Department or Janet Yellen or whoever has anything to do with the policy controlling this. He's still at the helm, and people still think it's his fault.
Yeah. Well, listen, I think you asked the question really in the right way, capturing what's going on. There was a time back in the 2008 crisis where we talked about too big to fail. Right. Today, I think it is so woke they go broke. And I think that the dynamic that was really unveiled in the Silicon Valley Bank, these banks have spent so much time on social issues. They're not doing the fundamentals of making sure their balance sheets are well, they're serving their customers well. And I think that may be what makes this banking crisis a little different. There's an entire banking industry that isn't paying attention to the P's and Q's because they're in some ideological war that shouldn't be their business. And I think that's going to be borne out over the next few months. That was a great Q&A, I thought, with Mark Meckler today.
Yeah, he is always so spot on with this stuff. And speaking of Silicon Valley, although not the bank in this instance, we have started to see people from the tech sector, from Silicon Valley, come out in support of President Trump. And it's not because they completely buy into republicanism or America First or MAGA or whatever the case may be, but for their own preservation of their own companies. That they are starting to align with Donald Trump. And you're seeing it across every sector. It's not just in the Silicon Valley sector. You're hearing a lot of CEOs that are quietly saying to their colleagues and to their employees, look, we're going to do the DEI thing on the surface. We're going to try to appease that crowd. But underneath, we're going to have to remove those policies that are causing us to fail. And now President Trump is having a fundraiser in Silicon Valley, and tickets, I have heard, reportedly sold out.
Yeah. No, listen, there is so much synergy going towards the Republican in Democrat places. I mean, that's really the dynamic. And I think the trial verdict may have unleashed it to a different level, but it's been going on for some time. And I think Mark said something really interesting. I think he said that when you combine hypocrisy with incompetency, you get the perfect storm for, an energized election. I think that's what Joe Biden has. There's so much hypocrisy. There's so much incompetence. And I think, today, that's why you see so many Democrats cross over and join Republicans on this vote condemning the ICC and actually sanctioning the UN's war crimes court, because at the end of the day, the idea that we're going to send someone to chase our ally because he's conducting a war that was started by terrorists is just distasteful for so many. You're seeing a lot of the Democrats start to bolt from Joe Biden because incompetency and hypocrisy together are becoming a liability for the Democratic Party.
Yeah. Okay, John, I want to ask you about something that you've been around these parts for a while when it comes to corruption in Washington. Hunter Biden's gun trial taking place there in Delaware. The judge, Mary Ellen Norica, who's the one that we were talking to Tristan about with respect to the plea deal and the pretrial diversion program that she had quite an aversion to. And I think that it's fantastic to see her actually running this trial pretty tightly. It seems to be. It's only day 2. But John, I think 25 years is what he could potentially face. I don't think he would ever see anything near it. I don't actually think he'll see any. But what are your thoughts?
Well, listen, I think on the facts, this is a open and shut case, right? And the best witness for the prosecution will be Hunter Biden. The things he and his legal team publicly said before. Remember, they issued statements when they thought they were getting the plea deal. He made mistakes. There are things he said in his book that completely contradict his current defense. I think the jury is going to be really hard pressed to say, well, Hunter Biden said these things and now he's telling us not to believe them. I think you're going to see I think that most people who've looked at the case think on the merits, this one is an easy conviction, but politics is everywhere right now. And I think we'll have to wait and see where that lands. Hey, I want to turn to something quickly because it really struck me in the interview with Congressman Barry Loudermilk, the chairman of the House Administration Oversight Subcommittee. He said that they're going to release testimony soon, but that he has confirmed that the Secret Service driver, the one who contradicts Cassidy Hutchinson in that crazy story about President Trump trying to hijack his own limousine, that he offered to testify all through the spring and summer of 2022, and the Democrats wouldn't take him up on it. They just let Cassidy Hutchinson have this story out there with no firsthand validation or contradiction to it. I think more and more, as Barry Loudermilk makes the case, the more we realize the Democrat January 6th committee intentionally tried to mislead the American public. It wasn't incompetence. It wasn't, shoddy work. It was, we're going to mislead the American public, and we really don't care if we get caught later on. That is very, very troubling, I think.
Well, I, for one, am shocked that Benny Johnson and Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney we're not jumping at the chance to have this testimony. I mean, wouldn't you think that they would want both sides of this? This concerns the People's House, the United States Capitol.
Yep.
And you would think that they would want to do everything they could, since they didn't do anything before it happened. You would think they would want to do everything they could after it happened to make sure that it doesn't happen again. But as John Adams said, facts are stubborn things, and you don't want to let those get in the way.
And that's what Loudermilk is focused on, just the facts and the evidence, giving people the truth. I'm not sure Benny Thompson was fully in charge of that committee. I think as time goes on, we're going to learn how much more a role the revenge tour of Liz Cheney may have had on that entire investigation. That's going to be an interesting dynamic to watch.
Indeed it is, yes. Benny Thompson, I think I said Johnson. I've had Mike Johnson on the brain today because I had a podcast conversation about it. But Benny Thompson leading that committee, oh boy. Congressman Barry Loudermilk always comes with the receipts, and so do you, John Solomon, and I can't wait to hear the receipts that you've got on that story that you teased at the top of the show. All right, that's it for us, everybody, but Grant Stinchfield is going to take you through the next